You've probably heard this a million times. You're about 60% water. But here's the thing. That water isn't just one big puddle sloshing around inside you. Today, we're diving into the body's hidden fluid compartments and the absolutely ingenious way scientists figured out how to measure these invisible worlds.
So let's start with that big number. Yeah, you're mostly water. But have you ever really stopped to ask, where is it all going? How is it organized? Because it's not in one big tank, that's for sure. The reality is way more fascinating.
All right, let's put some numbers on this. If you take a typical 70-kilogram person, that 60% works out to be about 42 liters of water. I mean, that is a ton of water. But your body is an amazing organizer, and it carefully divides all that fluid into these very specific, separate compartments.
So to really get this, we need to take a little journey into these hidden water worlds. And the key thing to remember is that they're all separated by the walls of trillions upon trillions of tiny individual cells.
Okay, so here's the first major split. About 2/3 of all that water, a whopping 28 liters, is actually locked inside your cells. We call this the intracellular fluid, or ICF for short. The other third, about 14 liters, is on the outside of the cells, and that, you guessed it, is the extracellular fluid, or ECF.
But wait, it gets even more detailed. If we zoom in on just that extracellular fluid, the stuff outside the cells, we find out it's not all the same either. Most of it, about 75%, is something called interstitial fluid. That's the watery environment that all your tissues are bathing in. And the other 25%, well, that's the plasma, the liquid part of your blood flowing through your veins.
Okay, so this all sounds incredibly precise, right? Which should make you start to wonder. It raises a really interesting question that scientists had to wrangle with for a long time.
Seriously, think about it for a second. How on earth could you possibly measure this? You can't just, pour these different fluids out of a person and into a measuring cup. So how in the world do we know these numbers with such confidence?
Well, the solution is one of those ideas that is so simple it's just genius. It's called the indicator dilution principle. The best way to think about it is like this. Imagine you need to find out the volume of a murky pond, but you can't see the bottom. This is exactly how you'd do it.
So here's the big idea. In a nutshell, you take a known amount of some kind of tracer, an indicator, and you add it to the fluid. You let it mix around and spread out evenly, and then you just take a little sample and see how diluted it's become.
It's a really logical process. The final concentration tells you everything. I mean, if your indicator gets super diluted, you know it must have spread out in a really big volume of water. But if it stays pretty concentrated, the volume must be pretty small. Makes sense, right?
And believe it or not, this powerful idea boils down to this one super simple formula. The volume is just the amount of indicator you put in divided by the final concentration you measure. So elegant, yet so powerful.
So how do we actually put this to work in a complex human body? Well, the real trick is using very specific indicators. You can think of them as tags that are designed to only go into certain compartments and stay there. And here's how they do it. To get the total body water, they use something called deuterium oxide. It's basically heavy water, because it goes everywhere that normal water goes. For just the extracellular fluid, they use a big sugar molecule called inulin. It's too big to get inside the cells, so it stays on the outside. And for the blood plasma, they use a dye that literally sticks to proteins in the blood, so it can't leak out of the blood vessels. Pretty clever. Okay, so we can directly measure the total water, the water outside the cells, and the water in the blood. But, hang on a second, what about the biggest and most hidden compartments of all?
Think about what's missing here. We still haven't directly measured the intracellular fluid, all that water locked inside our cells, or the interstitial fluid, the water between them.
I mean, there's no magic dye that you can inject that only goes into the cells and nowhere else. So what's the last piece of this puzzle? What's the trick?
And here it is. This is the big aha moment, and it's so satisfying. The answer is, we don't measure them directly at all.
We just use simple math. To figure out the volume inside the cells, we take the total body water we already measured, and we just subtract the volume that's outside the cells. And boom, 42 minus 14 gives us our 28 liters. It's beautiful.
And it's the exact same logic for the interstitial fluid. We take the total extracellular volume we measured, subtract the plasma volume that's part of it, and what's left over, 10.5 liters, has to be the fluid bathing our tissues. It is truly physiological detective work at its finest. Now, knowing these volumes is a huge deal for doctors. But it's not just about how much fluid is in each place.
The real mind-blowing part is what's actually dissolved in that fluid. The composition is literally a matter of life and death.
I mean, just look at this. It is a wild difference. The fluid outside your cells is basically a salty ocean, loaded with sodium. But the second you go inside a cell, it's a completely different world. It is packed with potassium and an incredible amount of protein. They're like chemical night and day.
And this massive difference, this chemical imbalance, it is not an accident. This is the entire point. It creates a tiny electrical voltage across the membrane of every single cell in your body. It is, quite literally, the battery that powers every nerve impulse, every muscle contraction, every thought you have.
And that is why this matters so much in the real world. This isn't just textbook theory. Understanding these compartments and what's in them is fundamental to everything from checking if a patient is dehydrated, to managing serious kidney and heart disease, to giving the right IV fluids in an emergency.
So, in the end, your body is this master conductor, managing 42 liters of fluid in a constant, microscopic balancing act of unbelievable complexity, and it's happening inside you every single second. It really makes you stop and think about that next glass of water you drink and the incredible journey it's about to take.